Fresh batteries, fresh batteries.
All right, sounds like we're up.
Need a water or something?
No, my voice is just shot. I think something's going around because Montero's voice is, her throat's jacked up, but I'm good.
Okay.
And just let me know when you're ready.
Oh yeah, we up. I'm on.
All right, so again, good evening. Want to welcome you all to one of our Title I Parent Engagement Universities. Again, if you're watching this live or if you're watching this recorded, you can sign in and participate. So we'll be talking about Assessments 101. We have 3 big assessments rapidly approaching. So we want to kind of talk about those 3 and give you some information on those and how you can, again, build your capacity as parents. Again, you can always sign in for our parent meetings via this QR code. So again, if you're at home and you're watching this and it's recorded, you can pause, take a picture of it with your phone, and you can sign in that you have participated in this meeting. So again, I'll let this sit up here for a couple more seconds. It will pop back up at the conclusion of the meeting, and we will again always upload this to our school website so you'll have at your disposal. So again, please sign in if you have not done so already for our Title I Parent Engagement Night tonight as we look at assessments. All right, so we'll be looking at 3 big assessments that are coming up. So we have MAP assessments, which is a measure of academic progress through NWEA. We also have, beginning next week, December the 5th, we have our Georgia Milestones End of Course assessments, and we have our access assessments for our English language learners. So we'll be going over some brief information about each of those 3 assessments. So MAP is the measure of academic progress. It is a computer adaptive test, which basically means if a student gets a question wrong, the next question is easier. And if a student gets the question right, the next question will be a little harder. So what MAP is trying to do is find that sweet spot for students and where they're really ready to engage learning. And we test MAP in 3 subjects. We test it in reading, in math, and in language usage. Language usage is things like grammar, etc. So again, we use that data, we'll talk about what we use that data for, but again, they take 3 assessments and they do this 3 times a year. So your students should have taken this in September. They'll be taking it again in December and January, and then we'll offer it again in May. Again, this type of test challenges our top performers without overwhelming students whose skills are below grade level. So the MAP is basically designed for students to miss about half of the questions. Students are tested in reading and math and language usage on a computer. Tests are about 1 hour long, and reports are provided after each test to show growth, areas of strengths, areas to improve, and goals for next year. So because we tested in the fall, we should see from our students, our goal as a school, and it's actually built into our teachers' performance goal, annual performance goals, is for students to grow by at least half the students in their classes to demonstrate measurable growth in reading or in math. Depending, and we'll show you what growth means. So again, when we take this test in December or January, the goal is, did the student get better at math if they've been taking math? If the student's been taking social studies or all courses, because all courses require reading, did the student improve in their literacy? And based on where they score, there's an estimate as to how much students would grow normally. So a lot of times our students outperform that, sometimes they underperform that, but it gives us information so that we can better improve our teaching, but also develop a plan for your student. These are just some of the examples of the things that MAP measures in reading. We're looking at vocabulary acquisition, word origins, comprehension of literary text, comprehension of nonfiction text. In math, number and number sense, measurement and geometry, probability and statistics, algebra, etc. So we get a report, and it basically shows us on each one of these subtopics how your students perform. So similar to a growth chart, MAP test measures your students' growth in math and reading each year. The scale is used to measure progress. It's not in feet and inches, but it's called a RIT score. And a RIT score just basically means where your student is ready to engage math or reading. Reports provide scores for each skill area to determine strengths, areas to improve, and the overall score. So there's a slight difference here between instructional level versus mastery. For MAP, MAP provides information about the instructional level of the student. Again, where they're ready to engage instruction in reading, math, or language usage. It provides a roadmap for students toward achieving mastery because what it's measuring is skills. So where are your students in the skills of analyzing informational text? Teachers can then use that to build their lesson plans to try to attain the standards that they need to demonstrate mastery. It does not measure mastery. Our standards are different in each course, and they're created by the state of Georgia. This is a skills-based test, it's not a standards and mastery test. But again, if we know where the students are strong, we can, or areas of improvement, we can then build the individual plan to use those skills to get to standards mastery. So RIT is basically kind of ready for instruction today. That's kind of the acronym for it. So a RIT score would be something like this. So let's say the student scored for literature, key ideas and details, they scored a 194. So it basically says that they scored a 194. These are the things in terms of key ideas and details when your student is reading literature that they can do right now. Locate details about characters in a literary text. Locate details about events in a literary text. Locate details about setting. These are things that the student is ready to do. So again, when we develop instruction, we want to give them the instruction that they're ready to engage in so they can continue to grow, not something they may struggle with. So MAP measures also normative data, so that helps us bring context to the data. There are grade level norms. So for each grade level, there's typical performance. So if a student scores below a certain score, we use MAP to then determine, well, not as a sole measure, but as a potential measure, does the student need further support? We have multi-tiered systems of support, our MTSS system, which is one of our CSIP goals that we use for this year. So one of the things that we use, one of the data points is MAP. So let's say a student is scoring below grade level on MAP reading. Does that mean the student should be tier 2 or tier 3 for MAP reading? For reading at our school? Not necessarily. The student may score low on MAP reading, but may be very successful in the class. Their grades may be fine, their attendance is fine, their behavior is fine. They're excelling at our school. They just have lower MAP scores than typical. We would not recommend that students for tier 2 or tier 3 MTSS remediation. However, if the student is scoring below typical growth in reading or math, and they have failed maybe a course in 8th grade or 9th grade in reading or math, they're currently failing in reading or math, they have attendance issues, they may have a discipline issue. These are things that we're going to use that data to go, yeah, we need to give this student some additional support and monitor that, progress monitor that, for the goal of being to get them back to tier 1 instruction, not to get them to special education necessarily, but again, get them back on track. So again, MAP is a tool that we use. Again, we do it 3 times a year. NWEA, the Northwest Evaluation Association, which creates the MAP test, provides schools with norms every 3 years. And again, it helps us to, really helps our teachers to compare where one student is relative to other students. They help them identify how to help students grow. They help them group their students for different tasks so that they're all successful in the room. Because you have a class of 30 students, you have kids of varying degrees of performance. You want to be able that you're still teaching the same standard, but in different ways to those students. MAP gives us a guideline for that. And again, this is an example of what those norms might look like. So for instance, in 10th grade at the beginning of the year, the student should be at a 220 RIT score. So if the student is at 190, that lets us know, whoa, they're way below grade level. Are there any other observable data that we can get to show if the student needs any more remediation? Our goals for MAP is to identify the knowledge and skill levels of students in the classroom or grade for placement in groups for differentiated instruction. We want to determine the strengths and needs of each group for planning ongoing instruction. We want to establish growth goals for each student for ongoing monitoring and feedback to each student, and review overall patterns in instructional strengths and needs for professional development for teachers. So again, we could look at MAP reports for the school as a whole and see our students as a whole are struggling in maybe vocabulary acquisition. This lets us know we need to do some things school-wide to support improvements in vocabulary acquisition and the teaching of that in our classrooms. Again, at Stone Mountain High School, we specifically test 9th and 10th graders, but in the fall, we have tested all students. We try to test as many kids as possible, so it helps us, the more data, the better. It helps us get a better idea of the strengths of each one of our students. So we have been testing the whole school, but primarily we are required as a district to test grades 9 and 10. Some of the features of MAP growth provides immediate results for our students. So we can see, for instance, with this example, that the student has consistently grown over time. It allows us to know that our students' readiness to learn, helps us with flexible grouping and differentiation. And it also lets us know, as a whole, did we move our students? We had 3 classes for a semester. Did those classes meet observable growth? What we call the median conditional growth. And if they didn't, that's a flag. Was our instruction specific enough? Was it rigorous enough? Did it really meet the needs of our students? So it helps us to identify teachers who are doing a great job. It helps us then to pair those teachers and demonstrate, allow them to demonstrate some of the things that they're doing great in their classrooms, but it also allows us to provide support where it is needed. Let's look at an example of growth. So let's say a student scored, let's say a student scored a 225 in the fall in, let's say, reading. So that would place that student in the 67th achievement percentile, which basically means out of every 100 students who took this test, and it's all over the world, students take this all over the world, that your student did better than 67 out of 100, 67%. Okay? Let's say that student then takes the test in the spring and scores a 247. That means your student made significant improvement, above average improvement. Their conditional growth is at the 99th percentile, and their achievement percentile increased to 91st percentile. In other words, they were at the 67th percentile in achievement. Now they're in the 91st percentile, but based on every student who scored a 225 in the fall, they did better than 99 out of 100. So it's basically measuring apples to apples. We're only comparing growth by the students who had the same score. So if you had a 225 and you scored a 247 in the spring in reading, you did better than 99 out of 100. And when the teacher sees that, they know they really did maximum effort for that student, allowed them to achieve that in that semester. Let's give an opposite example. Let's say a 218. So the student at a 218 had a 225 in the fall, now a 218 in the spring. They made significantly below average growth. Their conditional growth is at the first percentile, and their achievement percentile decreased from the 67th to the 35th. And if I'm a parent, that's a red flag for me, because I want to know, well, what happened in that class during that semester for my student to really not grow at all? They got worse in reading. You would think coming from the summer they would have did better because now they have instruction. Not always the case. So again, it gives that knowledge to the parent as well of, my student really got the instruction that they needed with the 247, or now they have the 218, they did not. And again, just for another example, the 232, from a 225 to a 232, that is average or typical growth. That's what we're looking for. So their conditional growth is at the 50th percentile, and their achievement percentile remains the same. So they actually increase, but they increase at their expected level of growth. So again, that's kind of how we use some of that data to measure student growth. There are different MAP reports for parents. There are MAP reports that you have access to as a parent in SLDS, or you have access to Infinite Campus, which we encourage all of our parents to have access to. You can pull up your students' MAP scores. It's at your disposal at any time. If you need access to Infinite Campus, please contact our counseling office. You can contact our counseling secretary currently, which is Ms. Seydu, and she can assist you with getting access to not only Infinite Campus. Infinite Campus will give you access to SLDS, and you can see all your students' assessment data via SLDS. So this just kind of shows if your student's been in the CAP for a long time, they've taken MAP for years, you can see their growth over time in the district. As a parent, what can you do with this information? You can use these results to encourage your student with a growth mindset. For instance, if your student is strong in literature but low in informational text, you can help him or her find informational text that would interest them. For example, there are news articles that they could read on their own. We have a platform called Newsella, which again, students can read articles and find at their disposal things that they like. Again, newspaper. If they like sports, informational text is always in our newspaper. We actually have the AJC free that we get with the Cal County schools and with our school library. So your student can have access to read articles on sporting events, for instance, and that would also help them improve with informational text. Let's say your student is strong in reading but weaker in math. You can guide him or her to websites that offer extra math practice, or encourage your child to be sure to ask questions in math class or ask teachers for extra help. Or ask your student to stay for a tutorial. Let's say the MAP scores for math come back and say the student is weaker in algebraic expressions. That's something that you then have that you can go to the teacher and say, my student will be staying after school on Mondays. Can you help them with algebraic expressions? Again, it empowers you to know what kind of questions to ask for the teachers. Same thing in reading, students scoring low in informational text. Can you please assist my student with informational text throughout the semester as they come through tutorial or during the class? How often do you work on these skills? And again, it gives you more power when you're trying to do parent-teacher conferences or just reaching out to the teacher asking for questions. Goal setting, ask your child about his or her MAP goal for the year. What are some things your child can do to try to reach the goal? Ask your child to talk to his or her teacher to find 1 or 2 focus areas that he or she can work on. And again, with MAP 3 times a year, they can actually see if they met and attained those goals. Encourage your child to read, and read. Research shows that the more you read, the better reader you will become. Help your child find text that he or she likes to promote a lifelong love of reading. Again, we have a ton of reading materials in our media center that students can check out during lunch, before school, etc. Please utilize the resources that we have, but the more they read, the better they're going to be in all subjects. Again, if you have questions, you can go to this website, www.nwea.org/parent toolkit, and that will give you some more tools and more information about MAP. Always, you can call the school if you would like a copy of a map score for your student. We can always provide that to you. Just call us, let us know. We can print it and give it to your child to take home. You don't even need to come to the school. Just let us know. We will get that information to your student. The second of the 3 assessments we're going to go over today is our 2023 Winter Georgia Milestones. Those are coming up next week, December the 5th, and they will conclude December the 11th. So again, we will start out with American Literature on December the 5th and 6th. That's typically for our 11th grade students. We will then have Biology, which is December the 7th. We'll do both parts 1 and 2 in the same day. We'll then have Algebra Concepts and Connections, which is basically our 9th grade math. That is December the 8th, which is a Friday, so please make sure your students are in attendance. And then on Monday, we'll do United States History. Again, if you have an 11th grade student, your student is taking 2 EOC Georgia Milestones, possibly this semester. Typically, they're scheduled, they have one, maybe one semester and one the next, but there are some students who may have both. Make sure your students are in attendance. The Georgia Milestones have historically counted as the final exam for those 4 courses and are 20% of the student's final grade. There was some, the state of Georgia allowed school districts to determine how much they wanted to count the milestones. As a district, we decided to keep it at 20%, with the belief that if the students really value that test and they know it's 20%, they're going to give it 100% when they come to take it. If your student does not attend the Georgia Milestones EOC in the course assessment, they will receive an incomplete on their report card. Doesn't matter if they had a 100 in the class. If they do not take the EOC, they get an incomplete. They will have until the next grading period to make up the milestones during what is called a mid-month administration session. We have a couple of mid-month sessions that are available the next semester, roughly, when we say the next grading period. If they do not make the milestones up at that point, they get a grade of 0 entered as the final exam, and then that is factored into their final overall class average. So again, if they had a 100, they got a 0 on the EOC because they didn't take it, their grade is going to be an 80. Typically, a student would not have a 100 in the class, so it's very important that they attend the milestones. What are some resources that parents have for the Georgia Milestones? The Georgia Department of Education website has a lot of really good student resource guides and study guides available with sample test items. So for American Literature, Biology, Algebra Concepts and Connections, and U.S. History, if you go to the GA, the Georgia Department of Education, website, and go to end of course milestones, all of those are there. So you can actually print those. You can actually just pull it up on your computer, and there's questions and answers, sample questions and answers for your students that they can take. You can quiz them yourself to see how they're doing and if they're prepared for their in the course assessment. There are also achievement level descriptors that basically says in these courses to be proficient, because again, a student is measured in 4 categories on the milestones: beginning, developing, proficient, or distinguished. And it helps us as a school when they get anything above beginning. Okay, so if a student scores developing, it basically means they're not quite at grade level, but we get a half a point for those students. Have you ever heard of a CCRPI score, which our school, all schools earn? One of the things we're measured on is academic achievement. So for developing, we get a 0.5 for the student. If they're proficient, we get 1 point. That means they make grade level expectations. If they scored at distinguished, we get 1.5. We want as many distinguished as we can get. Okay, so the achievement level descriptors let you know what your student is expected to know to be proficient. Okay? So again, you can pull these up and ask them, hey, could you tell me about this, and see what they have to say. Again, it just builds your capacity and your knowledge base as a parent. You can also go to Experience Online Testing Georgia. Excuse me. That is available for your students to take. We also offer this at our school. It is not the end of course test, but it basically is a sample of the platform so that the students can get familiar with all of the options and the resources that are available to assist them during the test, like a highlight option. There's a notepad or sticky note option that the students can, kind of capture information on as well as a a calculator. There's a calculator option on there for math. So again, they can play around in that platform and just become more comfortable with it before they take the test. Again, all of our students do this before they take the test anyway, but it is something that you can also do at home. Our testing logistics, again, all testing is going to be here at Stone Mountain High School. We'll be testing in our commons. We're doing arena style testing. It's just easier because we can kind of see and keep an eye on everyone. We kind of start at the same time and we'll finish at the same time. So again, we'll test all of our students in the cafeteria area in a quiet and a secure location. We do have makeup days, so when students, if they are absent, there are 2 makeup days, December the 12th and the 13th, for our students to make up those Georgia Milestones tests. We'll also be doing some rolling makeups as well to try to catch as many students as possible if they are absent. If your student has an accommodation via an IEP or 504, all testing accommodations will be provided for your students. Students with accommodations will test separately from other students. They'll test if they have extended time, or if they're one of their accommodations as a small group setting, they will test in a small group. So we already know who those students are. We've identified those accommodations. We've trained our teachers on what those accommodations are, and those students will be provided them beginning December the 5th. Our final assessment we'll talk about briefly is access. Access is for English language learners. We have a growing English language learner population at Stone Mountain High School. What access does is monitor the progress of English language learning proficiency annually. So what we want to see is, did the student get better with English language acquisition, with the goal of them eventually not needing any support in English language acquisition. Access establishes when English language learners have attained the English language proficiency. It helps us inform classroom instruction and assessment because we can see the level at which each of our English language learners are at. And it provides reliable and valid data for decision making and accountability. For instance, if we have a school that is not showing adequate progress for English language proficiency, then there are some strategies and things we need to do as a school to get better. Students are tested in 4 categories: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And those composite scores are kind of come from this. So in listening and speaking, for instance, which are roughly 30% of the overall composite, half of that 30% comes from listening and half of it from speaking. Reading and writing are 70% of the access test. Again, about half of the reading score is of that 35% is reading, and the other 50% is writing. And then for writing, there's a 70% reading component and a 30% listening component. And they actually wear headphones while they're taking the access test. So there's certain prompts that are given to them orally that they have to respond to. So again, we're testing listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and we get a composite score on oral language composite, literacy composite, and comprehension. Our English language learners are then tiered as a result in 3 tiers, tier A, B, and C. Our goal is to get all of our students to tier C. Our beginning students who are just learning English will be at a tier A. So roughly tier A are students who have just recently arrived in the United States within this academic school year without any previous instruction in English and or currently receive literacy instruction only in their native language, and that's not us because we don't do that, or have recently tested at the lowest level of English language proficiency. So we call that at our building this year intensive English. So before students would go to the International Learning Center for their first year, now these students come to us. So we engage them in tier A. Some of our students are in tier B. 70 to 80% of English language learners will be administered tier B of access for ELs. Tier Bs have social language proficiency in some, but not extensive, academic language proficiency in English, and or have acquired some literacy in English, but have not yet reached grade level literacy. So these are students who communicate with us fine, mostly, but may have some issues in terms of academic English or grade level literacy proficiency. Our Tier C students are approaching grade level literacy and academic language proficiency in the core content areas, which are social studies, science, math, and ELA, and will likely meet the state's exit criteria for support services by the end of the academic year. Tier C is required for ELs to exit the EL program in Georgia. So again, that is very important. Our goal is to get all of our students out of English language support.
Mr. Bill, I want to come in. Go ahead. Hey, this Coach Williams in the queue.
All right, so those are our 3 big assessments. We'll be testing all of our English language learners starting in January. That's going to be over 220 students. We'll be testing hundreds of students here in December for the Georgia Milestones test, and then we'll test more than half of our students in December and January for our MAP testing. Again, all 3 are very important. This informational session was provided to give you just some basic information about each one, and also just to build your capacity and knowledge base about each one, so you know some of the questions to ask, and where to also find some information. Again, please make sure you have not signed in, that you sign in on using the QR code. If you have any questions or any comments, please reach out to us here at the school. You can call us at 678-676-6302. You can call me directly at 678-676-6303. And again, if you need a MAP score, any questions that you have about access or about the course assessments, please reach out to us. We're only as strong as you are as a parent community in supporting us, and we're here to support you. Again, thank you for your support this evening. Thank you for participating, and again, go Pirates.